President.
The senator from Oregon.
Ask unanimous consent to vacate the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, it is hard to find the words that will truly reflect what an abomination the campaign finance system in America has become. The fact is, the only people who seem happy with the current state of campaign finance are billionaires that have phones full of the contact information of the most powerful people in the land. Otherwise, if you're a typical American putting in a hard day's work, supporting your family, you just probably have a sense that the campaign finance laws are rigged for the big and the powerful. Now, there was an era when running for office was as simple as putting your name out for the public. You'd go and get a few local civic groups in your corner. You'd bring in a few modest donations to get your campaign off the ground. Certainly is not that way anymore. It has now been well chronicled how a wave of money, particularly from a few secretive, powerful individuals like the Koch brothers, have flooded American politics in the last few decades. And that has grown exponentially in the years since the Citizens United decision. The fact is, there has been a tidal wave of dark money buying influence across America's political system. This isn't just about too many political ads on television and radio. Voters know that unless they unplug entirely and pretty much settle for a life out in the woods, they're going to see a lot of ads. But even beyond the ads in the election season, there is this deluge of money buying the support of Beltway think tanks, currying favor among lobbyists, funding so-called social welfare organizations that, frankly, aren't doing a whole lot of social welfare. The bottom line is, for those like the Koch brothers, having deep pockets means you can buy the right to grab hold of the levers of power of American government. And you can create a whole lot of noise that virtually drowns out the constituents back home. I'm heading home tomorrow, Mr. President, have about 9 town hall meetings scheduled in rural communities. And they're always amazed that we're having those kinds of discussions. My colleague, Senator Merkley, does them as well, because it seems that in most of the country, everything that resembles the government we know so well, direct, contact, open to all town meetings, is just getting drowned out by a deluge of dollars that creates all of this noise, fake noise, to use the language of the times, that drives out real discussion about substantive issues. So I'm going to talk about an example, and one that has certainly generated some real concern over the last few months. If you want to see what's wrong with the election system, in my view, you don't have to look much further than some of the letters that I have exchanged recently with the National Rifle Association. Now, a few months ago, there were news reports of a potential financial relationship between a Russian oligarch close to Vladimir Putin and the NRA. The big question was whether the Russian money had been funneled into the NRA to assist the Trump campaign and influence the outcome of the election. In my view, I'd say that's a question that most right-minded Americans would like to have answered. I'm the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, and there we have jurisdiction over the federal tax code. That includes the rules that pertain to political groups and tax-exempt 501c4 organizations like the ones that are maintained by the NRA. So I began in a series of letters that were sent to the organizations, sent to the NRA, to ask questions about their foreign funding. And I will tell you, the series of shifting answers I got in return from the NRA was enough to give you whiplash. First, when we inquired, because we had seen all of these news reports, they said, nothing to see here. Then, as we followed up and found that a little hard to square with these public news reports, they said, and I quote, well, we do get foreign funding. And then they went on to say, but it's just one Russian, and that's it. Then we heard another version of what was going on over at the NRA. They said it was a couple of dozen Russians giving money to the NRA. So we continued to follow up, and they told the press and they told me, hey, we're done with the Congress. We're not interested in answering any more questions. We're busy. We got other things to do. And that pretty much sums up the problem that we've heard described on the floor here this week with the campaign finance system. The information Americans have access to in campaign finance reports is just the tip of the iceberg, just the beginning of unpacking this whole question of where the money comes from in our political system. Everything under the waterline is where it gets seedy, but powerful interests have managed to figure out how to keep their handiwork hidden. The powerful use shell companies to mask the identities of who is really funding campaigns and so-called independent expenditures. Even simple questions asked of these powerful groups influencing campaigns, questions like, do you get money from overseas? The Congress and the American people cannot get a straight answer about. Now, there are members who want to see real changes made to bring some sunlight into this system. And they see how important that this is, given the onslaught of attacks on the campaign finance laws that are coming from the Supreme Court. These attacks are one major reason why I've co-sponsored legislation to create a constitutional amendment allowing Congress and the states to regulate and restore faith in our campaign finance system. And I will say, with respect to this approach, I didn't arrive at this judgment casually. Constitutional amendments, in my view, ought to be reserved for those situations when the delicate balance set up by the Founding Fathers has been upset. Or, in this case, jurisprudence that governs the system has also changed. That is the situation and the challenge our country faces today. I know that several members of this body have put policy ideas forward. Many of them, in my view, have real merit. Virtually all of them, in my view, would be an improvement on this rotten abomination of a campaign finance system that exists today. Virtually every day, folks back home get inundated with these smarmy political ads sponsored by groups that have these names that are just nonsense. You know, names like the American Association for American Values in America. I mean, there is one of these after, another. I will hear about what citizens think about this during those 9 town hall meetings that I'm going to be having over the next few days at home. And citizens often say, it's really good to have our elected officials, do this. And sometimes they kid me. So we've got more cows than we've got voters. And still, we're here to have this conversation because that's what I think the American political system ought to be about: direct communication, ongoing discussion with voters, actually being there, having the people we have the honor to represent be able to look us in the eye, ask questions, and say, we want to hear your thoughts because we believe that's how we can hold you accountable. And the flip side of that judgment is they don't think they can do it with the campaign finance system I've described today. And all of this is fed by these reports about lawmakers marching up to Koch Industries in order to plead for support for one proposal or another. And when people read these articles, they say it sure feels like that's what the political system has become all about. And it's why I've done even more open to all town meetings, because that's one way that I can show, at least on our watch, that's what we're doing to counter the fact that a handful of the most powerful, like the Koch family, can generate a disproportionately loud voice in our system of government. The fact is the campaign finance system is broken. It is long past time to fix it. I've appreciated colleagues coming to the floor this week to speak out on it. I believe, as has been written, that this series of letters that I've exchanged with the NRA just over the last few months is a textbook case of how broken the campaign finance system is, what happens when powerful organizations and individuals like the Koch family can have a disproportionately large voice in the political system. And I think the Senate ought to get about to the business of fixing this system and ending the current way in which political campaigns are financed, which, as I said when I began my remarks, is such an abomination that it doesn't pass the smell test. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.